Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest, most misunderstood questions in all of economics. Where does money actually come from? I'll give you a hint. The answer is probably not what you think. It's a process that looks a lot like magic, but by the end of this explainer, you'll see exactly how the trick is done. So, when you imagine money being created, what pops into your head? For most people, it's a giant printing press, right? Just churning out endless sheets of currency. Well, that classic image, it's not the whole story, not even close. In fact, that physical cash is just the tiny tip of a very, very large iceberg. Here's the myth-busting reality. The vast, and I mean vast majority of money in our economy isn't printed at all. It's created out of thin air, digitally, by commercial banks every single time they approve a loan. And that right there, that's the wild idea we're going to unpack today. To really get how this works, we have to start at the very beginning, with the one type of money that only the central bank can create. You can think of it like the seed from which the entire forest of our money supply grows. Now, this seed money, it has an official name. Economists call it M0, or high-powered money, and that name is perfect because this is the fundamental raw material, the monetary base, created exclusively by the central bank. It's the absolute foundation of the whole system. So what's actually in this M0? Well, it's pretty simple, really. First, you've got the physical stuff, all the notes and coins floating around in the economy. But here's the crucial part. It also includes the deposits that commercial banks are required to hold with the central bank. These are their reserves, and believe me, they are the secret ingredient to everything that happens next. And trust me, they call it high-powered for a very good reason. See, 1 rupee of M0 doesn't just stay 1 rupee. Oh no. It has the incredible potential to be magnified, to be multiplied over and over again throughout the economy. And that is where the real magic begins. Which brings us right to the star of the show, the multiplier effect. This is the real engine of money creation. It's a chain reaction of lending and re-lending that makes the money supply explode far beyond that initial pile of M0. Let's just walk through it. Say you deposit 100 rupees in Bank A. The bank can't lend out all of it. It has to keep a small piece, a fraction, as a reserve, let's say 10 rupees. But it lends out the other 90. Now the person who borrows that 90 rupees goes and spends it, and whoever they pay deposits it into their bank, Bank B. Now Bank B has 90 new rupees. It keeps a fraction as a reserve, maybe 9 rupees, and lends out the other 81. You see the pattern? This cycle just keeps going, creating new digital money at every single step. This whole incredible process is summed up by a single concept, the money multiplier. It's basically a number, a factor, that tells us exactly how much that initial seed money, M0, can grow. It perfectly captures the power of this lending chain reaction. And the effect is, well, it's huge. Just to put a number on it, if the reserve ratio is, say, 20%, every single rupee of high-powered money created by the central bank can end up creating nearly 5 rupees of money out there in the economy. That is a massive amplification. It's not magic, it's just the power of fractional reserve banking. And this, right here, is how the central bank steers the ship. By changing that little number, the reserve requirement, it can directly control the size of the money multiplier. If it wants to get the economy going, it lowers the requirement. Banks can lend more, the multiplier gets bigger, and the money supply expands. If it needs to cool things down, it raises the requirement, and the exact opposite happens. Okay, so we've got this amazing multiplier effect just creating money all over the place. But how on earth do economists and central bankers actually keep track of it all? Well, that's where the monetary aggregates come into play. This is kind of like our map of the money supply. You see M0 at the bottom, that's our base. Then you have M1 and M3, which are super closely tied to all this credit creation we've been talking about. M2 and M4 are a bit different, but let's really focus on the main ones here. All right, first up is M1. Think of this as the ready-to-spend money. It's the cash in your pocket plus all the money sitting in your checking account, what we call demand deposits. And since those demand deposits are the very thing being created every time a bank makes a loan, you can see why M1 has such a direct and powerful link to credit creation. Then we've got M3, or broad money. And this is the big one. M3 takes everything in M1 and then adds in time deposits. You know, things like fixed deposits. This stuff is a little less liquid, but it's still a massive chunk of the money created by the banking system. M3 gives us a much fuller picture of all the liquidity sloshing around the economy. In fact, M3 is so important that it's the primary measure the Reserve Bank of India uses to make its policy decisions. So when you hear on the news that the money supply is growing or shrinking, 9 times out of 10, they're talking about M3. It is the key dial they watch. So what about M2 and M4? Well, they're pretty simple. You just take M1 and M3 and add in all the savings people have in the post office. But here's the crucial difference. Post offices don't create loans like banks do. They're not part of that credit creation engine. So while M2 and M4 are useful, they're kind of diluted. They have a weaker link to that powerful multiplier effect we've been focused on. Okay, we've gone through the mechanics, the measurements, the M's, the whole shebang. But let's bring it all home. Why does any of this actually matter in the real world? What's the impact of these seeds and multipliers on you and me? Because this is it. This is the central bank's fundamental playbook for managing the entire economy. If they want to boost growth and make it easier to borrow, they lower that reserve requirement. That unleashes the multiplier, and 3 expands, and the economy gets a shot in the arm. If they need to fight inflation and slow things down, they do the exact opposite. They raise the requirements, choke off the multiplier, and tighten the money supply. So the big takeaway here is that a tiny change to that initial seed money, that high-powered money, can have absolutely massive amplified effects on the whole economy. Which leaves us with a pretty wild final thought, doesn't it? If most of the money we all use is just digital numbers created by banks when they decide to lend, is managing an entire economy really as simple as just flicking a switch? Or is there something more complex going on here?